Hello, today I'm talking with Joe Solheid, director with Fastenal's safety team. Joe, thanks for talking today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kurt.
So, when we think about ladder safety, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Yeah, one of the first things that always comes to mind, and there's a process for it, right? Is choosing the right ladder. So often that can be a simple part of the process, but it's often overlooked and is often really not done right. And that there is a process, right? When you're using ladders, choosing the right ladder, making sure it looks good before you use it, making sure it's set up right, always having 3 points of contact, and really being an expert. That's really important when you're using something that could possibly save your life. That falling from heights is something that could cause a significant injury or, God forbid, a fatality. So it's really important to start with that. Choosing the right ladder always comes to mind first.
So, what are some of the different types of ladders that are available? What goes into choosing the right ladder?
Yeah, so you have a lot of different ladders today. If you look throughout the history of ladders, if you will, it was pretty simple at the start. It was probably just a ladder with some rungs. Now you have anything from a step ladder, which is probably something that everybody has in their home, to a twin front, where you might have two or three different people on ladders doing different things. You have extension ladders, which go up beyond normal heights. You have multi-position or combination ladders that can do multiple different things, right? That it could be an extension, it could be a position ladder, it could be a lean-to. You have rolling ladders, and you have work platforms. So there are so many different types of those ladders. That's why at the start I mentioned you really need to be an expert on these sorts of things, because using the wrong ladder for the wrong application can really end poorly.
What's an example of that? What's one thing that comes to mind? Oh, I'm going to pick a ladder, but I actually picked the wrong one without knowing it.
Yeah, so maybe you're trying to use a ladder that isn't tall enough. So you're trying to get up on a roof and it doesn't extend far enough beyond the roof line. Could make it unsafe. Could cause you to fall or to have bad things happen.
It sounds like you've seen me work at my house, Joe.
Yeah, we all have those scenarios where I'm sure we can think of leaning too far off the ladder or not setting it up right just to get things done in a hurry. And I think we all just have to kind of step back and really think about the different factors, right? What is the height of the work being performed? What's the environment you're working in and around? Even the material of the ladder can be important, right? If you're working around active power sources, you want to choose something that's fiberglass and not steel. Maybe it's the weight of the materials you're carrying up the ladder that can factor into it. There's different weight ratings that factors come into play with ladders. There's so many different things that come into play, and really all of those things matter. That's why that being an expert, kind of the fifth part of that is super important.
Okay, so let's say that we've chosen a ladder. We're pretty confident that we've got the right ladder. And now the role of safety inspections. How does that come into ladder safety?
Sure. So ultimately, every time before you go to use something, and this could apply to anything, but will apply it to ladders, that could essentially save your life. You're going to want to do a pre-inspection. You're going to want to make sure that everything looks really good before you go to use it. And with ladders, that can be something as simple as making sure things don't look rusted. There's no cracks. There's no breaks. The feet look good. All those little simple things that we probably overlook. And then obviously on an ongoing basis, making sure you're continuing to inspect it, because different things can happen. Different people might borrow your ladders. Like at home, you might borrow it to your neighbor, and let's face it, they may not return it in the best form. So making sure that you have a regular cadence on inspections, not just the pre-inspection, but ongoing and after each use. That only helps you. The other thing to consider when you think about inspections is the environment you're working in. If you just use it around the house every once in a while, probably doesn't have to be as inspected as much as maybe someone in a paint booth or a service tech that has it out in the sunlight or outdoors in different conditions. It really just depends on the work environment, and then how often you're using it, and the abuse that it takes too. If you've dropped the ladder a time or two, it's probably time to really seriously take a look at it.
So people are up and down ladders all the time. What are some of the common errors that are made when working on ladders?
Yeah, I mentioned this a little bit before, but a lot of the times, one of the most common things is you will see people move what we call outside of the rails. You always want to keep the center of your belt inside the rails to make sure you're not losing your balance. You also see things like walking a ladder where you will literally walk the ladder back and forth. If you picture a ladder going left to right, when you're on the ladder, that's a big no no. Maybe the angle of the ladder isn't set correctly, especially with extension ladders. We see that very, very often. Maybe it's poor footing or balance. The ladder isn't on a level surface. That's why things like multi position or those combination ladders are nice because they have self levelers, right? Um, and then a lot of times too, we just see people not inspecting it prior to use. So it's broken before they use it. They go to step on a rail and it breaks and they get hurt. And something as simple as a pre inspection, kind of to your previous question, could have prevented a serious injury.
Okay, so we've kind of gone over what it takes to pick out a ladder. We've also talked about how you want to be safe on a ladder, but let's shift into next steps. What does a ladder safety program, how does that work? What does that even look like? How do you start?
Yeah, so I think it's really simple, and it really comes down to the 5 steps I started the conversation with. Your ladder choices. Make sure you know how to choose the right ladder and what ladder is right for your application. That kind of going back to the factors we talked about, right? Make sure you have a pre-use inspection kind of SOP or ongoing inspection program. That's going to save a lot of hurt in the end. Make sure you set up the ladder safely, right? That's the third step in the process. If you don't, again, kind of going back to that pre-inspection incident, that could get really messy really quickly. Always ensure you have 3 points of contact. That should be a rule, right? So when you're climbing a ladder, make sure both feet are planted and that you at least have one hand on the ladder to ensure that always occurs. If that occurs, more than likely you're not going to see a fall or an injury. And then know your ladder and the environment you're working in. If it's going to change, if it's going to be different, know it going in ahead of time and really make sure that you plan for it. If you follow those 5 simple steps, it can really lead to a very simple yet very safe ladder working program. And it's just something that really doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. Sure, you can add different steps or maybe different aspects of it, but really those should be the basics, and those should be a part of every ladder program out there.
Well, Joe, as always, thanks for talking today.
Thanks, Kurt.